Amos Slade did nothing wrong. For those unfamiliar, since it did come out in 1981,
Oh, I'm like the Crypt Keeper!
The Fox and the Hound is a Disney film based on a book by the same name in which a young fox named Todd, played by Mickey Rooney, and a hunting hound named Copper, played by Kurt Russell, become friends, only to find that the laws of man and nature alike try to keep them apart. Most Disney movies, especially at the time, had very beautiful, soft, serene openings with gentle music. Remember Beauty and the Beast? Or Sleeping Beauty? Any of those. All of the openings were very peaceful and gave you a sense of wonder and softness. This one? Nope. This one starts off with a literal bang. The baying of a hound, a vixen fleeing for her life, and the crack of gunfire. The music is fast and frantic, something you'd hear during an intense chase scene, which it is, or a desperate battle where the heroes are actually losing. We see Todd's mother, an unnamed vixen, running for her life. Why she has her kit with her? I don't know. Unless the hunters discovered her den, in which case that makes this more sad, because foxes usually have litters of kits. It's pretty rare for them to have just one or two, and if the den was found and that's why she's got him with her rather than having left him in the safety of the den, we can probably assume that the rest of her kits were killed, and he's the last one. And this is her desperate attempt to save the only child she has left. Man, I really miss when Disney had guts. She leaves him by a fence post and keeps running to draw the dog and hunter away from her baby and gets killed off screen. At this point, Big Mama the Owl finds Todd. She and two other birds use a little trickery to get a lonely old woman, Widow Tweed, played by Jeanette Nolan, to find Todd. Being a lonely old lady with a soft heart, she of course takes him in and raises him. At the same time that Widow Tweed is raising Todd, Amos Slade, played by Jack Albertson, is bringing home Copper. He already has Chief, played by Pat Bertram, so why another dog? Well, Chief isn't exactly a young dog anymore, and it's quite clear from later scenes that Chief is losing his sense of smell and isn't an effective hunting dog anymore, which is just a thing that happens to dogs as they age. Plus, while Amos never outright states it the way Widow Tweed does, he does still live very much alone and is probably lonely. His dogs are the closest thing to family he seems to have, though at the end of the movie it does seem like he's going to have more of a friendship with Widow Tweed. A lot of people back in the day lived like that. Their immediate family were basically the only people around them if they lived rural, and if they didn't have that family, they were basically alone. Widow Tweed and Slade are the only two human characters we see in the entire movie. Neither of them interact with anyone else. In the midquel that does not exist, Patrick Swayze and Reba, I love you both so much. And this movie might have been decent as a standalone thing, but when attached to something like Fox and the Hound, just no. Honey, no. We see that they do take part in community events, like the fair, but they never seem to have any strong relationships with anyone in particular besides their banter with each other. Also, apparently Widow Tweed is known for having a really good throwing arm, and I kinda love that. Widow Tweed is clearly not helpless, even being a lone old lady. When she gets revenge for her spilled milk, that's proof enough of that. Anyway, Copper is clearly meant to be next in line for Chief's position, something that happens rather blatantly after their months-long hunting trip when Copper grows up and proves his worth. He literally takes Chief's place in the front of the truck, and Chief doesn't even attempt to argue about it, he just accepts it. Grumpily, but still accepts it, that he's no longer top dog. Point is, Amos is a hunter. That's how he makes his living. That's how he puts food on the table. He also raises chickens, which would immediately put him at odds with any predatory animals that would come onto his property, especially ones that target chickens like raccoons and foxes. The fox in the henhouse is a classic saying for a reason. Foxes are well known as one of the worst animals to deal with when you have chickens. They're smart, they're sneaky, and they're very good at getting into places you don't want them. They also tend to kill a lot more than they need. Rather than just taking one chicken at a time, they'll wipe out the whole coop while only dragging off one or two of the bodies. Also, I know most people haven't ever been around a fox that wasn't descented. Most that are raised for domestication have their scent glands surgically removed, so very few people know this, but foxes stink. Really, really badly. It's one of those smells that sinks into everything around them and no amount of soap or perfume can get rid of. It is vile. Widow Tweed's house probably stinks to high heaven. Hopefully, she just went nose blind to it eventually and isn't just putting up with it. Foxes are not an animal you want around if you keep chickens, and Amos is, by upbringing and his trade, taught to see foxes as the enemy. He probably already knew that Widow Tweed had a fox cub she was raising, considering that they're neighbors who interact very little with anybody else, but he never had a problem with this that we're aware of until the event when Todd snuck out and met Copper. Now, meeting with Copper clearly wasn't the problem here. The problem was, well, look at what is the very first time Amos sees Todd on his property. This is probably the first time he's ever seen Todd anywhere outside of Widow Tweed's house, if he's seen Todd before at all, although he probably has, since he does say,
"Woman, your thieving fox was after my chickens."
So we can safely assume that he knew she had a fox kit she was raising, and Todd belongs to her, implying he's seen Todd with her before. So this man, who is a hunter by trade, who raises chickens and likely depends on them for food and income to some extent, is seeing a fox, a well-known predator of chickens, chasing his hens. We all know that it's not what it looks like, sure, but he doesn't. He doesn't know that Todd is just running from Chief and the chickens just happen to be running away in front of him. It looks like Todd is actively trying to catch them. Of course he charges out with a loaded gun and goes to confront Widow Tweed about keeping Todd away from his animals. Anyone would. Even if it was something that was normal to keep as a pet, like a dog, this same confrontation would have happened. I can tell you from personal experience growing up rural, if someone's dog got out onto someone else's property and chased or killed some of their livestock, either that dog wouldn't make it home at all, or if it did, its owners would be getting confronted with some pretty hefty charges and have to pay for the damages, and likely the dog would be put down, or at the very least, kept chained up or otherwise confined so it couldn't do it again. Because that's responsible pet ownership of any animal. You don't let your animals run loose, and you don't let them cause damage to other people's property. Looking at you, idiots who keep letting your dogs off leash in areas with signs telling you to keep them on leash, and then playing victim when they attack someone else or their pets. Shut up your whining about how your dog is normally so sweet and gentle and you didn't know that they'd tear those lambs or that chicken or the smaller dog apart. Shut your mouth and pay for the damages your animal did. Don't tell me it's not your fault, you aren't strong enough to control your pet, or it just got loose. If you're not strong enough to control that animal, then you're not strong enough to have it. Controlling your animal is literally your job as the owner. Where was I? Oh, right. Amos Slade. Widow Tweed, when confronted, responds with this.
Rubbish and poppycock. I don't believe it. He wouldn't hurt a thing.
Oh boy. I could give you a list a mile long of times I've heard this excuse from people after their pet did something bad. I've seen people literally watch their dog tear a smaller dog or cat to pieces and insist their dog was just trying to play. I can tell you that even as a kid, I was rolling my eyes at her saying that because I've already had experiences with people who would say the exact same thing. Facts don't care what you believe, and right now, the fact is that Amos saw, with his own eyes, the fox chasing down his hens. Now, in this particular case, we know she's right. Todd didn't intend to hurt the chickens, he was just running away from Chief. However, the fact remains that Amos did not know that. All he saw was a predator chasing his chickens, a predator who shouldn't have been on his property in the first place. Even if he was just a dog, he shouldn't have been on someone else's land or near someone else's animals without the owner's permission and supervision. I understand that this isn't something that you can always avoid. Accidents happen. But she's clearly been letting Todd have free run of wherever he wants, even after he's already caused trouble with her own livestock at home. Many people let their dogs wander on their land loose, like livestock guardian dogs, but that's when the dogs are trained and know their boundaries well enough to be trusted. They know better than to cross that line. I overheard a conversation, well, more an argument, between two old-timers once when I was a kid. I don't know what the argument was about, but I remember one of the men told the other one, "If I catch your dog on my property, I'm shooting it." To which the other man replied, "Good, because if you didn't, I'd shoot her when she got home. Dogs shouldn't wander off." The dogs I knew growing up were either kept in pens or tied up, or they knew to stay on their property and only on their property. Otherwise, they tended not to last long around folks who had livestock and kids to protect. Even Amos respects these rules, keeping his dogs contained. Copper, after having wandered off once and even if he caused no trouble whatsoever, was tied up. And we see Chief tied up fairly regularly, although it seems like he never really tries to wander off. Maybe he did in the past and chased a scent like Copper did, so Amos wants to make absolutely certain he doesn't wander off when he's not supposed to. You know, like a responsible pet owner or something. He shows them clear affection and cares a lot for his dogs. Even after Chief nearly gets killed and will probably never hunt again, when he's got a ready replacement right there in the form of Copper, who has already proven to be a great hunting dog, Amos doesn't do what a lot of hunters and a lot of people with working dogs would have done, and put Chief down. No, he has Chief's injuries treated, which probably wasn't cheap, and he wants revenge. Going to be straight with you? I would want revenge too. If someone else's pet caused horrible harm to mine, I'd want theirs to be put down, especially when the chase that injured Chief began because Todd was, again, on Amos's property when he wasn't supposed to be, and might have been going after his chickens or causing who knows what kind of damage. They didn't go looking to chase Todd. Todd came onto Amos's property uninvited and unwanted again. For all Amos knows, he's been doing this the whole time they've been gone. Remember, while we know that Todd and Copper are sapient and have thoughts, feelings, and can talk to each other, Amos doesn't. All he's seeing is a wild predator on his property harassing his animals, and when he tries to put an end to it, one of his dogs nearly gets killed. Now, I'm not going to say that Widow Tweed is a bad pet owner. Actually, yeah, I am going to say it. Widow Tweed is a bad pet owner. It is one of the most basic parts of responsible pet ownership. You do not let your pet run around wild and go onto other people's property without their permission. You don't let your pet run around loose unless they are on your property or in a designated place where that is allowed, like a dog park or beach. And I can hear the people with outdoor cats already, and yes, that is also a thing I have a problem with, but this video is probably going to be long enough as it is, so I'm not going to approach that just yet. Just know that an indoor cat is an alive cat. She lets her pet, which has already caused trouble, run around loose whenever he wants and only makes some effort to keep him indoors after she's confronted about it. Then, when he's an adult, it seems like she hasn't been keeping up with keeping him indoors, since the one neighbor isn't around to enforce it, which is lazy, and since consistency is key when it comes to animal training, if Todd isn't being kept indoors or taught what boundaries can't be crossed, it's to be expected that he'd go where he's not supposed to all over again. So she's being careless, and it's Amos and Chief that suffer the consequences. When Todd is home again and Amos comes over to confront Widow Tweed about Todd nearly killing his dog, she just locks him out and refuses to listen to the fact that her pet almost killed someone else's because she let him run loose and he was on someone else's property again. She doesn't take responsibility for that. She only gets sad about the "you can't keep him locked up forever" comment because she knows that, as a wild animal, Todd does need to be free and sent back to the wild where he belongs. She's not even upset about the damage Todd caused or that Amos nearly lost a beloved companion. She's upset that she can't keep Todd. We all know the next bit. One of the saddest scenes ever animated. She takes him to a nature reserve where he'll be safe from hunters and leaves him there to live his life as a wild animal. It's the right thing to do, though just taking him and leaving him there likely would have meant one less fox in the world, since he clearly had no knowledge of how to survive. Most rehab centers have enclosures where they'll teach wild animals being rehabbed how to survive in the wild before they're released into the real wild to give them a fighting chance. But Widow Tweed probably had no knowledge of things like that, if they even had any anywhere where she lived. Probably not, considering the time period. Thankfully, Todd lucks out and gets taken under the wing of not only Big Mama, but the obligatory love interest, Vixie. Now here's the part where a lot will argue Amos clearly was in the wrong. Amos finds out that she's taken Todd to the game preserve and released him into the wild. Now, one would say that this likely is far enough away that he'd never see Todd again, but as we see in the closing scene, it's not that far away. Todd could easily have come right back and started making trouble again once he figured out how to find his way around, and now, with a second fox, the game preserve is really not that far away. If someone had an animal, let's say a pit bull, that broke onto your property and nearly killed your pet, and the owner refused to take any responsibility for it or punish the animal in any way, you'd probably be really angry, right? Now, let's say along with that, their solution to the third time their pet has come onto your property and caused serious damage is to just take the dog down the street a ways and release it there. That doesn't stop the problem. If anything, it makes it worse, because now it's not even being supervised or restrained. The big one a lot of people point to is Amos going on the preserve illegally to hunt Todd and setting up cruel traps. While today we recognize these traps as cruel, they were pretty standard for use by hunters back in the day and just considered a regular tool. Yes, Amos broke the law going into the preserve, but he's also a man who nearly lost a beloved companion. Who knows, the perpetrator has gone unpunished and the perpetrator might come back and do it again. I'd want to put a permanent stop to that kind of problem too. Then, when Todd is utterly helpless and Copper is trying to protect him, Amos does what someone truly heartless never would. He shows mercy. He doesn't punish Copper or continue trying to hunt Todd. As long as Todd is willing to stay in the wild and not cause more trouble, he'll live and let live. Which, honestly, is more than I probably could have done if I'd lost a beloved companion to this animal. Oh, yeah, in the book, Chief dies. He straight up dies. I mean, the dog got hit by a train and fell down a cliff and hit the rocky sides multiple times on the way down. Without Disney magic, that is a very, very dead dog. Still, even with as grievously injured as Chief was, as horrifying as it must have been to watch his dog get struck and flung from the bridge, as many times as Todd has caused problems, he lowers his gun, takes Copper, and goes home. From what we see at the end, it does seem like he and Widow Tweed are going to have more of a friendship going forward. And in the midquel that does not exist, he does have more moments that show that he does have kindness in his heart, telling Tweed that if he sees Todd, he'll let her know when they're both looking for their lost pets. Not that he'll shoot Todd or harm him in any way, that he understands that she loves Todd as a pet the way he does Copper, and he hopes that she gets something she cares about back home safely because he doesn't want her to deal with that pain. Amos went to extremes, sure. but he had absolutely understandable reasons for doing so, and up until he went to the game preserve, he was legally in the right the whole time. Some might argue not morally, but you have to understand that this is a man protecting his home and livelihood from what seems to be an out of control wild animal. If Todd never came onto his property and stayed within the boundaries of Widow Tweed's fence, I doubt they would have had any problems at all. He would have just been his neighbor's weird pet. In short, Amos didn't really do anything wrong. He reacted pretty much the same way anyone else in the same situation, especially with the upbringing and lifestyle he had, would have done. I know people get caught up in how cute and cuddly Todd looks. I mean, just look at how many people are trying to keep wild animals as pets all the time, no matter how bad it is for them or the animals. Seriously, just get a dog. But Amos wasn't seeing a cute, cuddly little baby fox. He was seeing a predatory wild animal that was attacking his livestock and his livelihood, whose owner wasn't keeping him under control, and who nearly cost the life of a beloved companion that's been with him for many years. Can you really blame the guy for wanting to get revenge and make sure the threat was well and truly gone? I sure can't. I hope you've enjoyed this little rant of mine about fictional characters I clearly care too much about. My name is Moonstruck, and I hope to see you again in future videos. Adios!